The relentless Mexican sun beat down on Cuatrociénegas, a dusty town seemingly forgotten by time, on the crisp morning of October 2nd, 1897. Sweat beaded on my forehead as I wrestled the stubborn mule, Miguel, into the rickety cart. My 3 companions, all childhood friends, watched with amusement. There was Miguelito, his wiry frame perpetually in motion, always cracking jokes. Elena, the only woman in our group, possessed a sharp mind and an even sharper tongue. And lastly, there was Tomas, the quiet one, his dark eyes holding stories unspoken. "You'd think you were wrangling a demon from the underworld, Mateo." Miguelito chuckled, his voice a rasp against the dry air. "Easier said than done, amigo," I grumbled, finally securing Miguel. "This beast seems to have a personal vendetta against cooperation." Our destination, a dilapidated farmhouse nestled 25 kilometers outside of Cuatrociénegas, whispered to be haunted. It was a dare, fueled by cheap mezcal the previous night, a test of our courage or perhaps a foolish attempt to impress Elena. The journey was uneventful, the only sounds the creaking of the cart and the rhythmic clopping of Miguel's hooves. The landscape stretched out in a tapestry of browning cacti and parched earth, an unforgiving desert beauty. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in fiery hues, a sense of unease settled in my gut. The silence became oppressive, broken only by the mournful cry of a distant bird. We reached the farmhouse just as the first tendrils of darkness reached down from the sky. The structure was a skeletal silhouette against the dying light, its windows like empty eye sockets. Weeds choked the yard, and the porch where the paint peeled in melancholic flakes sagged ominously. An unnatural stillness hung over the place, as if the air itself held its breath. "Well, this is charming," Elena remarked, her voice echoing in the hollow silence. A shiver ran down my spine. "Don't worry, it'll be an adventure," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. Tomas, usually the most reluctant to participate in our escapades, surprised me by being the first to enter the house. The heavy oak door groaned in protest as he pushed it open. We followed, stepping cautiously into the gloom. The interior was dusty and cobweb-laden. A faint scent of mildew hung heavy in the air. Light from the setting sun slanted through a broken window, illuminating a few dusty relics of a bygone life. A chipped teapot on a cracked table, a faded painting hanging precariously on the wall. It was a portrait of a woman with sorrowful eyes, her lips curled in a faint smile. "Spooky," Miguelito muttered, his voice barely a whisper. We explored further, finding a dilapidated kitchen, a disused bedroom with a bed frame stripped bare, and a small study containing a dusty desk and a bookcase filled with leather-bound books. Elena ran her fingers over the spines, a thoughtful frown etching her brow. "These seem to be old medical journals," she announced, pulling out a thick book. "Published in the 1850s. As dusk descended, plunging the house into darkness, we decided to head back to the cart. Elena insisted on picking a lock on a small chest tucked into a corner of the study. Inside, she found a stack of yellowed papers, filled with cryptic notes and unsettling sketches of strange, deformed creatures. "What in God's name is this?" Elena whispered, her voice laced with a tremor. The last rays of sunlight bled from the horizon, leaving us enveloped in an inky blackness. We fumbled for matches, the scraping sound loud in the sudden silence. A gust of wind howled through the broken windows, carrying with it a sound far more disturbing. A low, guttural moan. Miguelito flinched. "Did you hear that?" We exchanged nervous glances. The moan came again, closer this time, emanating from somewhere within the house. An icy dread gripped me, the hairs on my arms standing on end. The medical journals, the unsettling sketches, it all pointed to something horrifying hidden within these walls. "Let's get out of here," I hissed, my voice barely above a whisper. But before we could make a move, a blood-curdling scream pierced the night. It was Elena's voice, filled with raw terror. We spun around, hearts pounding in our chests, towards the source of the scream. It came from the study. We rushed towards the room, adrenaline surging through our veins. The door to the study creaked open a sliver. A cold draft brushed past us, carrying the faint metallic scent of blood. With trembling hands, I pushed the study door open further. The room was plunged into darkness, the only light a faint sliver of moonlight peeking through a broken window. Elena's scream echoed in my ears, a chilling reminder of the unseen terror that lurked within. Miguelito, ever the impulsive one, lunged past me. "Elena!" he cried, his voice cracking with fear. Tomas, usually the stoic one, hesitated beside me. His dark eyes, usually calm, were wide with apprehension. "Mateo," he rasped, his voice barely audible. "We should get help." I nodded, fear constricting my throat. But before we could move, a sickening thud echoed from within the study. It was followed by a choked gasp and a muffled struggle. "Elena!" Miguelito's voice was raw with desperation. We couldn't just stand there. Taking a deep breath, I fumbled in my pocket and pulled out a matchbox. Striking a match, I cupped the fragile flame in my hands, the flickering light casting grotesque shadows on the walls. Tomas, ever the pragmatist, grabbed a lantern hanging precariously from a hook on the wall. Together, we cautiously entered the room. The air hung heavy with the metallic tang of blood, and a sense of unnatural stillness pressed down on us. The overturned desk, its contents scattered across the floor, told a chilling story. The medical journals Elena had been looking at lay open, their pages stained crimson. A single blood-stained boot lay abandoned on the floor. Panic clawed at my throat. Where was Elena? Where was Miguelito? The lantern in Tomas's hand flickered, casting grotesque dancing shadows on the walls. A cold draft snaked through the room, extinguishing the match I held. We were plunged into an inky blackness, the silence broken only by our ragged breaths. Suddenly, a soft moan came from the far corner of the room. It was a low, guttural sound, unlike anything I had ever heard before. It sent shivers down my spine and made the hair on my arms stand on end. "Elena?" I called out, my voice barely a whisper. There was no response, only the sound of my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Then, a faint scraping sound came from the corner, followed by a low growl. My blood ran cold. We weren't alone. Tomas, ever resourceful, grabbed a heavy book from the fallen bookshelf and brandished it like a weapon. We edged towards the corner, the lantern casting an eerie glow. As we rounded the corner, the lantern beam fell upon a sight that froze my blood. There, slumped against the wall, lay Miguelito. His eyes were wide with terror, his face contorted in a silent scream. A large, gaping wound marred his chest, and blood stained the floor around him. But it wasn't the sight of his injury that chilled me to the bone. It was what lay beside him. A hulking figure crouched over Miguelito's lifeless body. It was vaguely humanoid, but its proportions were off, its limbs too long, its body impossibly thin. Its skin was a sickly gray, devoid of hair, and its face was a nightmarish mask of stitched-together flesh, with a single glowing red eye staring back at us. The creature let out a low growl, the sound vibrating in my bones. Fear threatened to paralyze me, but adrenaline surged through my veins, giving me a burst of desperate energy. "Run!" I screamed, grabbing Tomas's arm and dragging him towards the doorway. The creature whirled around, its single red eye fixated on us. It let out a guttural roar and lunged after us. We stumbled back into the main room, the creature hot on our heels. The front door was our only hope. We scrambled towards it, fumbling with the rusty latch. The creature surged forward, its long, skeletal arms reaching for us. With a desperate heave, I threw the door open. We spilled out onto the porch, the cool night air a welcome shock against the stifling heat of the house. We didn't stop to catch our breath, we just ran. We ran blindly through the darkness, the creature's enraged roars echoing behind us. The uneven terrain tore at our clothes and scraped our skin, but we didn't dare slow down. After what felt like an eternity, we reached the safety of the cart. Miguel's mule, spooked by the commotion, was whinnying and pawing at the ground. With shaking hands, I untied the reins and climbed into the driver's seat. Thomas scrambled in next to me, his chest heaving with exertion. We lashed the reins, whipping the mule into a frenzy. We tore through the night, the pounding of hooves the only sound that dared compete with the pounding of our hearts. We didn't look back, not wanting to see if the creature followed. The rhythmic clopping of Miguel's hooves against the parched earth became a haunting death knell in my ears. As the first light of dawn painted the sky with streaks of pink and gold, we finally reached the outskirts of Cuatrociénegas. We were a sorry sight, dust-caked and trembling, our clothes ripped and stained. The sight of the town, a beacon of normalcy amidst the horror we had witnessed, brought tears to my eyes. We went straight to the sheriff, a gruff old man with a handlebar mustache and a skeptical glint in his eyes. We recounted our tale, the dilapidated farmhouse, the unsettling findings, and the monstrous creature. He listened patiently, his face betraying no emotion. When we finished, he shook his head slowly. "There's no such place," he said gruffly. "No farmhouse 25 kilometers out, just miles of parched desert." Disbelief washed over me. Was it all a nightmare? Had the heat and mezcal conjured up the terrifying events? Elena, Miguelito, were they figments of our collective imagination? Tomas, however, caught my eye. A flicker of something, suspicion maybe, passed between us. We knew what we had seen, the horror we had barely escaped. We left the sheriff's office, a cloud of doubt hanging heavy over us. We never spoke of the farmhouse again, not directly, but sometimes under the pale moonlight, I see a flicker of movement in the distance, a single red eye glowing in the dark. And I remember the whispers in the fields of Cuatrociénegas, whispers that promised a darkness none dare speak of.